1893 at the Eclipse Colliery at Tivoli, near Ipswich, were unimaginably tragic. 1893 was the year of the great flood that affected both Ipswich and Brisbane. The Eclipse mine was in the path of the water as it flooded the Bremer River.
John and Elizabeth Wright came from County Kilkenny in Ireland. They arrived in Queensland in 1867 with their two young sons, Tom and George. John was a miner, so he came on to Ipswich, where he found work at the Hooper and Robinson mine in North Ipswich, a mine that became known as the Old Tivoli Pit. When they'd been here only 6 years, John decided that he would go out on his own. He would have known the area at Tivoli quite well, and this was the land where he took out a lease. At first things didn't go so well. The coal seam that he was started on was not particularly good quality. But after a couple of years he found another seam, which he called the Eclipse. And it was the Eclipse mine on which the Wright mining enterprise was founded. The 1880s were a prosperous time in mining and John was doing well. But in 1890, a tragedy happened in the family with the death of their third son, Richard, often called Dick, in an accident at the mine. Dick was the engine driver, responsible for the engine which hauled the wagons along the tramway from the mine to the river. Apparently, he took some steps backwards on the track and fell, and one of the wagons rolled over him. They carried him home, but his chest was crushed and he died in agony several hours later. And then, in 1893, came the flood, and that changed everything.
By the end of January, the mine was carrying a head of water that was beginning to leak into the workings. Thomas Wright decided to recover some of the rails that would be lost in the event of the mine flooding.
On Saturday morning, the 4th of February, Tom Wright gathered together 10 men at the mine, including his brother George, to go down into the mine to get the rails. At this time, the Eclipse had two entrance tunnels, tunnel number 1 and number 2. Tom and George and 5 of the men went into tunnel 1 and the other 3 men into tunnel 2. The man at the top to pull up the wagons, Sam Renfrey, remained of course on the surface. One load of rails had been taken to the surface when the most extraordinary thing happened. Suddenly, without any warning at all, the roof of the mine, where the coal seam was closest to the surface, suddenly collapsed under the weight of the water that was lying on it. The men inside the first tunnel had no hope of escape. They would have been overwhelmed as soon as the water hit them, and their bodies would have been hurled along until it came to some sort of solid object. The men in the second tunnel were much luckier. Because they were further away from the water, they were able to scramble up the tunnel to the exit, pushed up as much by the air behind them as by their own efforts. Soon a crowd of people gathered at the mine to see what had happened and to establish just exactly which men were underground. Families of the dead miners were there too. You can have to imagine the distress. For the Wright family, they had now lost their eldest 2 sons. The 2 boys who had come with them from Ireland and who were now playing a role themselves in the mining business with their father. And now, by a stroke of fate, they were gone. The Eclipse disaster was without a doubt the most devastating event in the life of John and Elizabeth Wright.